Marhaban. Welcome. Welcome to the SeaWorld Research and Rescue Center. I am Dr. Elise Marquis, and I'm very glad to have you all here tonight for this new session of the Science Talk series from 2025. As you may know, this series of Science Talk at the Center is developed in close collaboration with the Environment Agency Abu Dhabi, the Emirates Natural History Group Abu Dhabi, the Natural History Museum Abu Dhabi, and Nautica Environmental Associates. We have just concluded an extraordinary week as Abu Dhabi had the privilege of hosting the IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature, World Conservation Congress. This major global event, held every 4 years, gathers IUCN members, commissions, and both state and non-state actors from around the world to share their experiences, innovations, and latest research in the fields of conservation science, practice, and policy. Over 10,000 delegates attended the opening ceremony, graced by the presence of world leaders, including His Highness Sheikh Khaled bin Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Numerous motions were debated and voted on until late last night, with one shared goal: to shape the global nature conservation agenda for decades to come. You may have had the chance to take part in this remarkable gathering, or perhaps you followed it from afar. Either way, tonight we are very proud to bring a glimpse of the Congress to the heart of our community here in Yas Island. To reflect the diversity of topics covered at the Congress, we will feature not one tonight, but 2 topics this evening. We are honored to welcome 2 distinguished guest speakers joining us from abroad. We will have first Dr. Christopher Gottlieb from the University of Southampton, who will take us into the hidden world of the coral reefs. And of course, we have Dr. Laurie Marker from the Cheetah Conservation Fund, who will guide us across the open grasslands and savannas of the African continent. So that's a very exciting lineup. Please note that tonight, because we have 2 different topics, we will be having the Q&A session following each talk. But before I introduce our first speaker, I'd like to remind you a few housekeeping points. We kindly ask you to avoid going in and out of the room, remain quiet during the presentation, and most importantly, please switch off your phone or set them to silence. The most exciting content is right here on stage. All right, we're gonna change the slide and put the second slide on to announce our first topic. Here you go. All right, I'm gonna welcome Dr. Christopher Gottlieb on stage. Dr. Gottlieb is a lecturer in marine biology and ecology in the School of Ocean and Earth Science based at the National Oceanography Centre of the University of Southampton, UK. His research focuses on the functional ecology of reef fishes. He uses a variety of techniques, including field studies, lab-based morphological and molecular techniques, and 3D imaging, to explore how fish work as animals and the functions they perform in complex marine ecosystems. Recently, his work has focused on some of the world's smallest vertebrates, and this is exactly what we will be focusing tonight. So let's dive into the world of cryptobenthic fish with Dr. Christopher Gottlieb. Here you go.
Thank you very much, Elise. Cool. Excellent. Thanks very much for that introduction. And also thanks very much to SeaWorld Research and Rescue Center for having me here tonight. Yes, they've been very, very helpful, allowing me to get here, helping me to visit the IUCN Congress, and also present this presentation to you. So tonight, I'm going to be focusing on my favorite fishes, which are called cryptobenthic fishes. It's a bit of a horrible word, but we'll get to that in a minute. But tonight, I'm actually going to start by talking about my favorite topic, which is, Are we plugged in? There we go. Cool. Myself. So I thought I'd take an opportunity to give you a bit of a background about academic careers by just telling you my story. So if you're interested in how we get to be scientists, you can see at least one person's journey. So I started my career with an undergraduate degree at the University of Newcastle, and I studied marine biology there. As soon as I finished my degree, I moved to Australia and did a master's. I'd intended to stay in Australia for a year and a half to do my master's, but I ended up spending 10 years there, actually 15 years there. I ended up doing a PhD. So during my PhD, I studied herbivorous coral reef fish, so big coral reef fish that eat algae, looking at how they influence coral reef dynamics. But throughout my time at JCU, I always had a passion for studying the smallest reef fish, but my supervisor said, no, you can't work on those. So as soon as I got away from my PhD, I moved to a small university in inland Australia called the University of New England and jumped on the opportunity to study these really small fishes. There I was working with a specialist in what's called biomechanics, so studying how animals work as basically machines. So you can look at jaws working like levers and study the physics of them. And I had the opportunity while I was there to use some really advanced imaging techniques like micro CT scanners. So like a CT scanner in a hospital that gives you a 3D image of your whole body, you can study really tiny things using what's essentially a microscope 3D scanner. So I could look at these tiny fish that I study and look at this individual bones in their skeletons to start looking at how they're different. While I was at UNE, I was lucky enough to be given an honorary position at the Australian Museum. So I can go to the Australian Museum and use their collection. And also I managed to get a Fulbright exchange scholarship to work with a taxonomist at the University of Washington in Seattle. So taxonomy is the study of describing new species and looking at how they're related to each other. So it's really gave me some really good opportunities to describe new species and study how that's done. For the last 3 years, I've been at the University of Southampton in the UK, and I'm still primarily studying these small coral reef fishes, but what I won't really talk about too much is that these fish are present in all oceans. So tonight's talk is going to focus on coral reefs, but these little fish that I'm talking about are present in every ocean around the world apart from the Arctic and Antarctic. So I'm studying some cryptobenthic fish in the UK now, but I still do as much work as possible on these fish on coral reefs. So let's get down to the body of the talk. Cool. So as ecologists, we're interested in studying animals and the environment they live in. And two really important pieces of information we can get about the animals in the ecosystems is abundance, which is just the number of animals in an area, in an ecosystem, and diversity, which is the number of species in that ecosystem. As coral reef ecologists, if we're interested in fishes, most of the time what we think about if we want to know the number of fish and the number of different species of fish on a reef ecosystem, what we usually want to do is put on a mask, put on some fins, usually put on some scuba gear, and jump in the water. Why wouldn't you? The way we study fish often is we'll do exactly that, and we'll swim along a set distance, and we'll count all the fish in all the species we see, so we know how many fish there are, how many different species there are in that set area. The problem with these techniques is that we miss we're missing about half of the fish species present and about half of the individuals of fish that are present. So These are the cryptobenthic fishes. As I said, it's a horrible word. Crypto means cryptic, it means camouflaged, it means hidden. Benthic means living on the seabed. So these are camouflaged fish that live on the seabed. Cryptobenthic fishes aren't a taxonomic group. They're not a family of fish or anything like that. They're a group of families. So we've got gobies, we've got blennies, we've got triple fins, we've got dottybacks, all sorts of different groups. But what they're united by is these characteristics of being camouflaged and living on the seabed. The other thing that makes cryptobenthic fish special, or how we characterize cryptobenthic fish, is that they are small. Really small. So this is probably a bit generous. I had to make them this big so you could even see them at all on the screen. Most of the fish we're studying on reefs are about 20 millimeters long. We have a 50 millimeter cutoff saying anything that grows longer than 5 centimeters during its entire life is probably not cryptobenthic. I've got an example here on a clip. If you can't see it, that's pretty much it. My finger's not very big. This is actually an example of probably the most abundant fish in the waters off Abu Dhabi, and it's about 20 millimeters long. So these are a group of really diverse, really abundant, really tiny fishes. So how can we sample these cryptobenthic fishes? I've said you want to swim around and count fish, but these things are too small to see. Most of the time, they're actually hidden inside the nooks and crannies of the reef themselves, so you couldn't see them even if they were big. What we can do is we can use a very specific technique, which we call enclosed anesthetic stations. So the way we do this is... Can I have my video? Thank you. So this is an example of an enclosed anesthetic station with myself and my dive buddy Sterling. We have a double bed mosquito net with a 7.2 meter long chain sewn around the bottom of it. What this does is the length of the chain, if we put it in a circle, means that we delineate exactly 4 square meters of reef, so we know our area. Usually the idea of putting this mesh down is we put it down nice and quickly and it traps everything inside. We're making a bit of a mess of this one, but it's the video I've got. The net also serves a purpose which I'll come to later. We then cover the whole thing in a tent. We take all sorts of camping gear underwater. It's very interesting. The tent serves a purpose of enclosing the whole area in, basically trapping all the water, and it actually helps us basically enclose the anesthetic we use to anesthetize or put all the little fish in this area to sleep. So what we've got here is clove oil, just the spice, the essential oil, in spray bottles. And this is an anesthetic. We spray 2 liters of this solution in using spray bottles. Your hands get very, very sore and crampy. We then wait a couple of minutes, and then we take the tent off. And then what we've got there is we've managed to anesthetize all the fishes in that area, and it then allows us to gently roll the net back and look at the waft through the reef and find all the little fish that are asleep. Here's my dive buddy Sterling getting a little goby out of the reef. And this is a fantastic technique because it allows us to get every single fish from a known area of these small fish. The problem with it is that one of those samples can take us an hour because there are that many fish, and we've got to look in every little nook and cranny. We've got to waft all the fish out and collect them. If we look at visual transects that I was talking about earlier, where we're swimming along and counting them, every year probably tens of thousands of these surveys are undertaken. In all of scientific history, the points on this map show the locations where these enclosed censuses have been done. So fewer than 50 locations around the world, and really this is the only way to actually get that ecological data, that abundance and diversity that I was talking about, on these small, hidden, and really diverse fishes. So the points on this map show locations where we've used this technique. And the bar graphs, show the number of fishes on average in these locations. The orange is through the tropics, the pink color is the sort of subtropics and temperate regions. So the units on these bars is fish per square meter. So if we look through the tropics, we're looking between sort of 18 and 30 fish on every square meter of reef of these cryptobenthics. So if you imagine an area the size of this screen, we'd probably have 300 of these fish, easily. This is actually an underestimate. There's only about 230 there. One more, please. Cool. So there are lots and lots of these fish out there. They're quite diverse, but should we care about them? Do they actually do anything? Well, cryptobenthic fishes generally do three things really well. The first thing they do is they grow, and they grow really quickly. So on settling, a fish like this, within its first 10 days on the reef, will grow by about 50%. If you actually look at the growth in terms of length of fish, most growth on Earth happens by cryptobenthic fishes. But that's really cheating, because we don't measure growth in terms of length, we measure growth in terms of weight. So at any point in time, the total weight of all of those cryptobenthic fishes on the reef only accounts for about 1% of the weight of all the fish on a reef. They're that tiny, they don't really matter. The second thing cryptobenthic fish do, and it's kind of given the game away, is they die, and they die in prodigious rates. So this little fish here, we used to call it Eviota sigillata, which is the adorned dwarf goby. It's actually, we're probably going to have to describe it as a new species. But this fish holds a world record as the shortest lived vertebrate. So the backboned animal with the shortest lifespan. A friend of mine worked on these in Australia, and he collected and followed the community as much as he could on a reef. And what he found was, for this species, the oldest fish he could find, as hard as he looked, was 59 days old. What's really remarkable is, as well as living for just 2 months, these things spend more than 3 weeks floating around as a larvae out in the blue. So they spend maybe 3.5 weeks as an adult on coral reefs. In that time, they do their growing, they do 10 days of getting up to maturity, and then they have to find a mate, reproduce. Some of these things even manage to change sex and reproduce again while they're on a reef. They're amazing. So, the first thing they do is they grow. The second thing they do is they die. But they don't die of old age. Oh, no, I'm lying. Excuse me. I've said they last for... Thank you. Okay, so I was talking about the age of fishes. How do we know they're only 59 days old? Well, fish have got a really useful thing that they can tell us. So this obviously isn't part of a fish, this is part of a tree. So we all know, I'm sure, that trees have rings. When you cut a tree down, you can see the rings on a tree and count how many years old it is. How these rings form is because throughout the seasons it gets warmer and colder, and the trees grow at different rates. The wood's denser, and then it grows more and it's less dense, and you can see this as bands. Fish have got bones in their ears called otoliths or ear stones. And what's really remarkable is they have bands too that tell us exactly the same thing. So this is an ear bone out of a large fish, and because wherever you are in the world, pretty much, the temperature changes throughout the year, their growth rate changes, just like in trees, and there's different density bands. How on earth does that work when you've got a fish that doesn't live a year? The thing is, if you only live 7 weeks, your growth rate actually changes day to day with temperatures during the day. So on these tiny fishes, you can actually count daily growth rings. So you can know how old they are just by looking at these little rings in their ears. Cool. Okay, so getting back to the story, they don't die from old age. I mentioned that just before I got given me clicker. They die because they get eaten. If you put them in a fish tank, these things can live almost 2 years. We had one in a fish tank in my last lab that had lived about 20 months, and we were looking at publishing a paper saying we had the oldest goby of this species in the world. Unfortunately, we looked into the literature and found a really obscure paper by a very famous fish taxonomist who had had one that had lived about 3 weeks longer. Anyway, back to the story. So, these things don't die from old age, they die from being eaten, but this fish is a relative of a hamor, it's a grouper. This isn't the predator of a cryptobenthic fish. The normal predator of a cryptobenthic fish is more than likely another cryptobenthic fish, or even a shrimp. This is a mantis shrimp at the top. We did some work in Australia trying to look at what eats cryptobenthic fish, and the answer is everything. Absolutely everything. In fact, a size difference of 11 millimeters changes these fish from being friends to being food. So this fish here will eat this fish here. What this shows is that we've got a really abundant group of little fish that get eaten at absolutely ridiculous rates, and everything eats them. And the food webs on coral reefs are really, really complicated. There are many, many, many levels. You've not just got little fish, big fish, the end. We've got little fish, just small fish, slightly bigger, all the way up. So these fish seem to be really important and at the bottom of coral reef food webs that then lead up to supporting the fish that people want to eat. The question is, how on earth are they still there? We've got these tiny fish that die, and if you actually look at the rates of mortality, or the rates that these things get eaten, you're looking at up to 8% of the population a day. So 1 in 12 of these fish gets eaten every single day. How are they still there? The answer is, we don't really know. And this is the next thing that we're starting to look at. So the one thing we do know about them is that they must have an amazing capacity to reproduce and replace themselves as they get eaten. The unusual thing, the only unusual thing we can see about cryptobenthic fishes is that they have some form of parental care of their eggs. Most fish, when they lay their eggs, they spawn them out into the water, they float away, and that's it. That's as much parental care as they have. Most cryptobenthic fishes look after their eggs in some way. So this is a goby, this is a male goby, this is its nest, the yellow things here are its eggs. The male will stay with the eggs, it will waft them with fresh water so they get oxygen blown over them. It'll often nibble them to stop things growing on them, it'll chase things away. It guards those eggs very, very well. Like I said, cryptobenthic fish aren't just one group. There's all sorts of species of cryptobenthic fishes, and they've got different ways of looking after their eggs. So this is a pipefish. It's a relative of seahorses. So if you imagine a seahorse that's basically been stretched out, that's a pipefish. If you don't know about seahorses, this is a male, and here on its tummy is its brood pouch. The female lays the eggs into the male's brood pouch, and the male is pregnant with those eggs until they hatch. The male looks after them. This is another example. This is a cardinal fish. This is another fish that we collected 2 days ago, just off the coast here. These are what we call mouth brooders. So they look after their eggs. So the female lays the eggs, they're fertilized, and then the male carries them in his mouth. The male of these species has even got a specially adapted mouth, so it can actually breathe while it's got the eggs in there, which is a real benefit to it. But yeah, so all of these fishes have, or not all of them, but the majority of cryptobenthics have some form of parental care of their eggs. The issue is, as I said at the beginning of the talk, once the eggs hatch, they still go out into the plankton and have to spend 3 weeks floating out there in real danger. the average little fish in the plankton is dead. 99% of some planktonic fish larvae will get eaten. So how do they survive out there? That's the question. I did some work looking at the larvae to see if there was anything special. So I looked at the morphology of the fish, so the shape of the fish, because the shape can tell us a lot about how good they are at swimming. And a lot of reef fish larvae are nice and sort of deep-bodied, and this means they can move lots of water as they move their tail and swim really effectively. It also means that they're like little rudders, so if they can turn really well, and they can avoid predation. So I wanted to know, are cryptobenthic fish, do they show some form of morphology that allows them to be really good swimmers, to do well out in the plankton? The answer is no. They have the most useless larvae of all fish. They're little squiggly elongate things. Most fish look like this the day they hatch and then turn into something that looks competent. Cryptobenthic fish generally don't. They stay looking like they've just hatched. This one here is the one exception. This is a really unusual fish in that it's got these big fins that might help it float, but that is 5 species out of about 800 in the cryptobenthics. The rest all look like this. So we know that these fish look after their eggs, then they go off into the plankton, and somehow the plankton manage to stay near the reefs that they're born on and stay there in a really big number. And what this means is that there's basically a cloud of larvae, of cryptobenthics, hanging over reefs. And as an adult's removed, there's a larvae ready to drop in and take its place and grow up to an adult. Essentially, it's raining babies on coral reefs. So, to sort of conclude this bit of my talk, we've said that these things have got really short lifespans, they don't live very long, and they generally die not from old age, but by getting eaten, and somehow, through some sort of reproductive wizardry, they've got really amazing capacity to replace themselves. We did some modeling, some scientific mathematical modeling, using the number of fish present, the number of eggs they can make, how quickly they die, to actually calculate what we call turnover. And this is the capacity for animals. It's essentially generation time, but it also takes into account how much growing they can do, to look at how much energy these fish can pump into the ecosystem in terms of they settle, they grow, they get eaten, that energy carries on, and then they're replaced, and so on and so forth. What we found was the capacity of the cryptobenthic fish to replace themselves and pump energy into the food web is 14 times higher than for any large coral reef fish out there. And if we actually modeled it out, we could estimate that up to 2/3 of all the weight of fish that's eaten by predators on coral reefs comes from these tiny little fish. Now that's really interesting. If you remember at the beginning of the talk, I said that at any one point in time, these fish only account for about 1% of the weight of the fish on the reef. But this ability to replace themselves, grow, get eaten, replace themselves, grow, get eaten, means that these fish are, a never-ending jar of sweets on coral reefs. These things are pumping energy into the ecosystem. So, what we've got is a really abundant, diverse, and potentially important group of fish at the bottom of coral reef food webs. But that's about all we know about them at the moment. And as I've said, we only really know about their abundance and diversity from remarkably few locations around the world. Do we know anything about their future? So, most of us will know that for a lot of reefs are in trouble, a lot of reefs are changing. We get bleaching due to high temperatures. There's all sorts of threats. Do we know anything about how cryptobenthic fish communities will face these sorts of challenges? Well, a small amount of evidence, basically the only location that anyone has ever sampled cryptobenthic fishes for more than one or 2 years, their data set covered one tiny location over about 20 years, and the dataset finished 2 years ago. But they showed that with a bleaching event, the cryptobenthic fish community on this reef changed. Now, I'm showing you a horrible graph. This is the number of fish over years. This reef suffered bleaching events and cyclones and all sorts of challenges in this year, 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 this year. Yeah. So this reef was in trouble. But these lines, all I want you to get from the lines is that they don't really do anything. They're not going up, they're not going down. If anything, this line might have gone up a little bit. But regardless of the challenges this reef faced, what this graph is telling us is that the fish community didn't change. The coral community did, but the fish, in terms of the number of fish present, were fine. But the fish that made up, at least the cryptobenthic community, changed completely. We had a completely different set of fish. And that stayed like that. The coral came back at one point, those fish stayed in that new configuration. And we don't know why. So we know that we know that the cryptobenthic fish are very dependent on very specific habitats, but we don't know why they didn't recover. Maybe we weren't looking in fine enough detail to see the habitats that these things actually need. So the question is, we've looked at these fish and said they're really important at the base of coral reef food webs, but if we lose a healthy reef like this, we get, as I've said, a different fish population. Is this going to be ample prey for the big fish that depend on these down the food web? We don't know. This is all the sorts of things, like I've said, we know so little about these fishes. So, I'm losing track of time. How long have I been talking? Oh, I need to wrap up. So, what can we do? Well, I'm lucky enough to have just been nominated to be co-chair of an IUCN specialist group looking at gobies and blennies, which are important parts of the cryptobenthic fish community. The IUCN, as I'm sure you all know, is generally best known for its red list, its ability to categorize different animal species into critically endangered, vulnerable, so on and so forth. The data we use to red list species is entirely based on the abundance and distribution of fish. So we really struggle with cryptobenthics because we don't have the data to really do it. We've done the best job we can on a lot of the species, but over the next few years, we're going to try and get more data to support this red listing. We also need to think about how climate change is going to affect reefs. These fish are subject to fisheries in some locations. They are caught and eaten as whitebait and fry. Aquarium collectors do collect cryptobenthic reef fishes, and we need to look at the impact of that. It is, however, quite well regulated, but we do need to think about it. And in some locations, gobies themselves are a threat. In the Great Lakes, this is a round goby. They've invaded this lake system and are eating lots of fish eggs. And the problem is nobody looks at gobies, so they only notice them when there are hundreds there. So it's already too late. The problem is we're not looking hard enough to see what these gobies and blennies and other fish are doing. So at the moment, our specialist group got approved in August, and because of the Congress that just took part, everything at the IUCN is on hold while the Congress happens. So we can't start our group properly until February. We have a membership in place. We're looking for people with conservation expertise, and we're looking for sources of funding to help support activities. But what we're really hoping with this and future activities is that we can help support these small fish and help coral reefs and ecosystems to stay healthy into the future. And with this, I'd like to say thank you very much. Sorry, I lost my tongue.
That's amazing. I'm pretty sure most of us didn't know about cryptobenthic before, but hopefully we'll become ambassadors of those fish. All right, Yes, and I am actually welcoming on stage Dr. Matthew Mitchell, if you want to sit here. And Matthew is part of the SeaWorld Research and Rescue Center, and actually he has been working very closely with Dr. Gottlieb this week as we are starting a large-scale survey, I would say, on those fish here in Abu Dhabi. Just maybe quickly before we start with question, Matthew, do you want to explain what you're looking for and what we started?
Sure. So I'm hoping by now you should understand the importance of these fish, but also that we have multiple critical knowledge gaps within our global knowledge of what these fish do and how they respond to their environment. Within the Arabian Gulf, we have the most extreme seasonal temperatures in the world. We have cold temperatures ranging from, during winter, from 20 degrees Celsius, but they go up to 36 degrees in the summer. So what we don't know is how individuals are responding to these changes in the seasons. As Chris said, they've got very short lifespans, so they have to get through these critical thermal environments and also high salinity. So hopefully what we're going to be able to do is by starting a long-term monitoring system, we'll be able to understand how these communities change from the individuals, how they can physiologically tolerate these kind of temperatures and what impacts it has. And then also how these communities might be responding in terms of the fluctuations in populations and then their capacity to provide food for the rest of the coral reef food webs. So, yeah.
Amazing, exciting. All right, we start with one first question. All right, over there. One question, please.
Okay.
One question. Yes.
Only one question. But I'll also ask a question on the next talk. Yeah, so I love the mangroves. They're probably one of my favorite places to visit in the UAE. And do small fishes like these play any major roles in environments like mangroves?
That's a really good question. So what I mentioned at the end there, that these little fish are very habitat specific. They live in very specific areas, but the mangroves have a huge number of gobies that are specialized for living in just the mangroves. And we know even less about them than we do about the coral reef ones. So yeah, absolutely. And in the mangroves, that's where a lot of the juvenile fish are, like the juvenile fish that we want to catch, the snappers and things like that. So these little gobies are probably really important prey directly to the fish that we're interested in catching. Good question.
Amazing. All right, to the back over there, yes.
Thank you. When you start your research, are you going to be working on the knowledge gaps that we have, or will you be working on previous research?
That's one for you.
So what we know of actually cryptobenthic fish is globally is very little. In the UAE, even less. So we have 2 studies that have been published so far. Well, one study that's been published and one survey that Chris and myself did a few years ago. So we will hopefully be building on the local knowledge, but also addressing some of the critical questions at the global scale as well. So using this system, because it is such an extreme system, and it represents what we might expect environments to be like in the future elsewhere, it's a great system for which we can address potential climate questions associated with climate change and the impacts on coral reef fish communities. So, yeah.
And just adding to that, I mentioned that there was one study that had done long-term data in one tiny location. That has now stopped. So in terms of monitoring of these fish around the world, as far as I'm aware, there's nothing being done. And there's only ever been one study done on any seasonal impact on these fishes. So if we've got any ability to be able to look at these changes that happen here, it would be phenomenal. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Exciting. Here, on this side, Claudia, yes. One question, no?
I have the question about the distribution of the gobies. So you were speaking about mangroves then coral reefs, then we have also, I think, inland lakes, brackish lakes. So their tolerance of different salt concentration and temperature concentration must be extreme high. Do we have selected species that are able to cope with the extreme salinity, or how does it go? Because I know they are also in saline lakes here, and there the salinity goes extreme up in the summer months.
So there are something like 2,200 species of goby. So they're the most diverse group of fishes, I think, bar one out there. So like the second most diverse group of fish that exist on the planet. So some are very tolerant and have a wide range of tolerances, but also there are so many species that they fill so many niches that, yeah, some are very tolerant to lots of things, others are very specific, but to very extreme conditions as well. Yes, they will live in all things. And there's gobies, as I've mentioned, the round gobies, they can live in complete fresh water as well. So they span a huge range of salinity and temperature tolerances within the group, but sometimes that's just because there are so many species with so many different capacities.
Great. In the middle of it, yes. We'll take one more question here and one last question over there. Yes.
Hi. Okay, so back in the Philippines, it's very well known for its marine biodiversity and rich in coral reefs. But the problem is the pollution. So how does coral reef degradation impact the population and diversity of the cryptobenthic fish?
That's a really good question. Just like the sort of bleaching I mentioned, the different habitats and different rates of degradation on reefs can change which species we find. So you might see one type of goby that's happy living in, for example, high sediment reefs with low coral cover. Often you find those around like river mouths with pollution and things like this. And so basically there's different gobies that live in different habitats. You probably would find a similar number overall, but they'd be very different species. So one of the things I want to look at is to see if any of these goby species are potentially indicators of change. Like when we see one species disappearing and another arriving, is that telling us that the microhabitats have changed ever so slightly? That's one of the things. That's a good question.
All right.
Hello, yeah. First of all, I just wanted to say it was a really interesting talk. And one thing I found particularly fascinating was when you mentioned the ear bone of the fish, how you can find the age based on the ring structures formed. I was curious whether this is only for the cryptobenthic fish or for all fish.
You'll probably
no. Pretty much every fish have ear bones that you can then use to age them. Ear bones are pretty fantastic little bits of history. They basically are catalogs of not only age, but the environment and the metabolic rates of the animal as they grow. The microchemistry of the otolith as these fish grow lays and changes. And from that, we can get different things like energy requirements. We can get the temperature of the environment that they're living in. And we can tell whether or not they're moving from different habitats. So within Abu Dhabi, you can tell if a fish has come from a mangrove and is now on a coral reef, or if it's gone to a seagrass bed. So they are fascinating little libraries of the life history of an animal.
Okay.
And they're also amazing because they're really hard and they last really long, so you can actually find historical records by looking through the sand. People dig through the sand and find otoliths historically and study the history of the fish in those communities.
That's amazing. I see a lot of hands up but I'm mindful of the time. Chris and Matt will stay here after the talk, so please come over and talk to them. We could speak about fish for all night, I think. But we're going to move on to the next topic, actually. Thank you, Dr. Gottlieb. Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. Oh, yeah. All right. And if we can change to the third slide to introduce, oh, yes, Cheetah. Ooh, all right. We will, yes, give a warm welcome to Dr. Laurie Marker. She's coming now. Dr. Laurie Marker is a conservation scientist and the founder and executive director of the Cheetah Conservation Fund. An expert with over 45 years of experience creating conservation strategies for cheetahs, specializing in human-wildlife conflict, illegal wildlife trade, human livelihood, and captive trading. Dr. Marker has published more than 150 research papers and 5 books. In 1990, she launched the CCF, which is a Cheetah Conservation Fund, in Namibia, the cheetah capital of the world, with a mission of creating a permanent place for cheetahs on Earth. And it's her amazing journey and her amazing conservation effort that she's coming to talk about tonight. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Laurie Marker.
I'll stand right there if that's okay. And I hope this works. Thank you very much. Hello, nice to be here. I think we're kind of still tired from the IUCN, which we just got out of last night, and the SeaWorld booth was wonderful, but great to be able to share cheetahs with all of you, and several friends are in the audience there too, so thank you all. You saw the video, they're wonderful, but I'm going to talk about keeping them alive in the wild through our research, as well as our communities and the conservation work that we're involved in. Of course, they are the fastest land animal and very, very unique in the way that they're built. And I guess the one thing I should say is most people don't know the difference between a cheetah and all the other spotted cats. But the cheetah has those beautiful tear marks which run down from their eyes. And that is one of the ways to help distinguish them. Besides, their spots are different, but that's okay. I'm not going to go into all the different aspects of how they run, but they are the most unique of all the cats, and they're one of the oldest of all the cats. And they actually diverged about 6 million years ago, and their closest relatives are the North American cougar in South America and the South American jacaranda. They're the only genus in their species within their genus, which is Acinonyx, and they're the smallest of all the big cats. They've been revered by people for over 5,000 years. And yet with that, it's interesting, so many people don't really know much about them. And that's how I got involved, really, in cheetahs. They are beautiful. A female will have up to 6 cubs, 4 to 5 is average. It's about a 95-day gestation. And the mother leaves the cubs and hunts on her own. She is solitary with her cubs most all of her life. The cubs will stick with her until they are about 18 to 22 months of age. These are about 6 months of age right now. They've got that long, fluffy mantle that's on their back, which makes them look like what's called a ratel or a honey badger, which is an African, very aggressive little mammal. But that's part of mimicry, and cheetah cubs grow up playing and running and chasing and learning how to hunt from the time that they are young. Male cheetahs stick together their entire lives. They form what's called a coalition. And with that, a male can hold a very good territory, especially if he's got some brothers there. A female has much larger home ranges than do males, and females have mate choice and actually pick the male that they want to breed with. And so if a male has a nice hunting ground with good prey and maybe good water, a female might spend more time in that area. And so having a coalition actually really helps the males. The way they hunt is pretty extraordinary. They stalk their prey going into full speed, and they can go up to about 110 kilometers per hour. But they're a sprinter and can only go full speed for very short distances. Their tail that is straight up in the air right there goes back and forth. It's very powerful, helping them change directions. So when they're running and chasing after their prey, they never go straight. They're zigging and zagging. And when they hunt, I always think it's great to think about, at 110 kilometers per hour, there's 2 points in their stride when they're flying through the air, and the rest of the time only one foot's touching the ground, and then when they hunt, they trip their prey with their front paw. So I wouldn't try doing that yourself at any given point in time, but they are pretty special. And actually, you can find a cheetah if it's right-handed or left-handed for if they're hunting by the power which is in one of those legs. So they're pretty specialized in the way that they do hunt. So I started my life with cheetahs a long, long, long time ago, but First, I have to say that I grew up on the back of a horse. I do ride my horse every day that I can when I am with my horse in Namibia. So I'm going home in a couple days, and I can't wait to go riding. But I also love goats and dogs, and that'll be a part of my story tonight as well. But a long time ago in Oregon, there was a wildlife park that had just opened in the 1970s, and I was there right at its beginning, and it was called Wildlife Safari. And that was in 1974, and I had first seen a cheetah there. And I was running the veterinary clinic, and we were one of the few places in the world that had cheetahs. And I asked people around the world what they knew about cheetahs, and people said, we don't know much, even though people had had them for over 5,000 years. They don't breed well in captivity. They have a very short lifespan, and we're losing them in the wild. Good luck. And I thought, well, what do you mean, good luck? So a couple years later, I ended up with this cheetah that's running through that sign, and her name's Kayam. And my job was to find out if a captive-born cheetah could go back out into the wild and learn how to hunt. Well, in 1977, that brought me to Namibia when I found out that cheetahs were in crisis. The farmers were catching cheetahs like flies, 800 to 900 cheetahs a year, and when they caught them, they were killing them. And I wondered, is it real or is it perceived? Were they really catching that much livestock that they were killing that many cheetahs? And the answer was really no, but I had to come back and spent my life now trying to figure out how to whittle that all out so that we could save the cheetah. Cheetahs go to marking trees, males do. Females do too, to pick up the scent for their male that they want to mark with or breed with. The farmers figured out that they could put these catch cages there, and when they caught them, they would kill them. Now, I want to come back to my life in captivity because I went from Namibia, where I taught a cheetah how to hunt for several months, and came back to America and thought somebody should do something to help cheetahs. They're still not breeding. I've developed the most successful breeding program in North America. Maybe we should set up a global program. I started the International Cheetah Stud Book back in the early 1980s, and I just will point out that our Middle Eastern population in North Africa is about 11% of the near 2,000 cheetahs that are living in captivity around the world. And that's a North American, sorry, I was just in North America, but coming down here to our current population, we don't have that many cheetahs that breed and give birth in the world. This year alone, we have only had, in the world, only 75 cubs born. And if we're lucky, we'll have maybe 150 cubs on a global basis. So they don't breed well still in captivity. And globally, they're declining still. So the population, we lost about 90% of the world's population in a 100-year period of time. I'm based down in Namibia in the southern part of the, right here, which is called the Cheetah Capital of the World. I've set up another base this year in about 10 years ago in Somaliland. Cheetahs are found in about 23 countries and 33 populations. 20 of those are under 100 individuals, and of that, most all the cheetahs are found outside of protected areas. So often we think of protected areas as being nirvana. What I always say is the cheetah has taken me outside of a square box to find solutions to the problem so that the cheetah can live on Earth today. So the problems really are that of loss of habitat, human-wildlife conflict. We also found in the early 80s that the cheetahs lacked genetic diversity, and that actually affected their reproductive, having severe abnormalities and also disease problems. And then there is the illegal wildlife pet trade. But these are the problems that we are facing today. In 1990, I had gone from the wildlife safari to the Smithsonian, and in 1990 sold everything I had and decided to move to the new country of Namibia, which got its independence in 1990 to set up a conservation organization. With that, I now have parlayed my one old Land Rover into about a 58,000 hectare private reserve, as well as a model farm. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this as being a model for how we're trying to help save the cheetah around the world. And with it, Otjiwarongo now is called the cheetah capital of the world. Our backyard is a beautiful reserve in Namibia. We actually live in harmony with our wildlife on what are called conservancies. And we're part of the Waterberg Conservancy, and that mountain behind is the Waterberg Plateau. And in Namibia, our conservancies are an integrated system where we have wildlife on our land, we grow enough grass, we protect our livestock, and then wildlife like cheetahs and leopards can also live on the land with us. Developing the programs to save the cheetah are research-based, and then we cover conservation and then look at supporting it through education. And these are our key areas that we're involved in today. And our programs are very diverse in what we do. We're a very holistic organization looking at how the systems work and where people are within these systems. But as a scientist, we always look at the animals, but then how do the animals fit with people? And by living on the land with the people, because cheetahs aren't in national parks, we've had to develop a variety of programs that really support the people to live in harmony with the cheetah. As a conservation scientist, my background was really trying to understand more about the overall health of the cheetah. In captivity, why didn't they breed well? When we found out the lack of genetic diversity, I wanted to find out much more about, well, what does the health of a free-ranging cheetah look like? And so have done all of the baseline studies to tell the world what a healthy cheetah does look like. With my hands on nearly 2,000 cheetahs, we've banked down with a genome resource bank of over 20,000 samples. Every cheetah that comes into us, we collect blood, tissues. We've got a genetic lab at our center in Namibia. And we do freeze all the sperm of all the wild males that we've had come through the lands. And we've had, now I think banked, we have over 300 individual males that have been banked. And our genetics lab is very, very successful when we've able to look at the whole population within Namibia. We're working also within the populations of the Horn of Africa as well as that of Kenya. And we've found some genetic abnormalities as well, besides just the fact that they have poor sperm quality, over 70 to 80%. We see kinked tails, we see malformations in the mouth. One of the good things, though, over the years that I've been there is that the farmers have quit killing and catching as many cheetahs. But with that, we still want to find out more about the population structure. So we actually have trained dogs that work with us that are scat detection dogs and go out with us and our ecologists to try to find where the cheetah's scats are. Those scats can come into our genetics lab where we can extract the DNA. So we look at scat from a variety of different ways, and we call it black gold. Most of the animals that we have our hands on, we're able to put back out into the wild, and this has allowed us to understand the real behavior of the cheetahs living in the wild. And it also has allowed us to work closer with the farming community on whose land the cheetahs are living. We use satellite collars now, and we've been collaring and tracking cats for almost 30 years. Just to give an idea, cheetahs have one of the largest ranges of any mammal on Earth. They can cover up to an average of about 1,500 square kilometers. And using camera traps, we can find out more about the density of these animals. They live in very large areas and very, very low densities, about 1 to 4 cheetahs per 100 square kilometers. And then with that, and this is a map of our farm. The blue is our Waterberg Plateau, which is right where our farm is. And each one of the white squares is about 5,000 hectares. And a cheetah's covering about 20 farms that size. Their ranges are huge. And the map that I have in the middle is of a female who, and that's only over about a 2-month period of time, covered almost 35 farms. Today we've got the farmers that are all tied in with us into what we call an early warning system on the collars, and when the cheetah goes through their farms, and if they've signed an MOU with us, they can follow where their cheetahs are. And these days they're helping us name not only the cheetahs on their farm, but the cubs that are being born on their farms as well. Solutions really are big, and when we look at big landscapes like the cheetah has, we have to look at big pictures. And with small populations of cheetahs in many of the areas, and half of the countries in the last 100 years where the cheetah has gone extinct, we are today looking at augmentation and translocations of cheetahs into other countries. Developing community programs has been critical. The involvement of governments, I cannot tell you how important that is on a global scale, and looking at capacity building and training, which is a part of the work that we do. We develop coexistent models where we want to teach people that they can live in harmony with nature as well as predators. And living with a predator, if you're a livestock farmer, you think that it's the predator's problem. But really, livestock management is about us knowing a little bit more about how to better manage our livestock. We've employed a very ancient breed of livestock guarding dog, which is the Anatolian Shepherd, or the Kangal dog, which has been used for over 5,000 years in in Turkey to protect livestock. We brought the dogs in about 30 years ago, and we've placed over 800 of the dogs over the years. We monitor them closely. We've got a stud book. We work with the farmers, and we see between 80 to 100% reduction of livestock loss by having the dogs with the herds. This has reduced the farmers having to kill not only the cheetah, but other predators, because as a predator biologist, I love all predators, and predators are very important to help maintain the health of our ecosystems. This has allowed us also to get very involved in other community programs. Here I love your camel milk products, like your ice creams, and we make our own dairy products, as well as Dancing Goat Creamery, and this is because we're teaching people that instead of just eating your goats, you can do something good with it. You can have your goat for a long time. I was a goat judge in America, so you can understand why I like goats. And we work with a lot of women's groups as well. And throughout Africa, the women are usually kind of secondary and often don't get the educations, but they're hardworking. And I will employ, as a woman scientist, most of my organization is women. From our geneticists to our veterinarians to our ecologists, we have good men too. But we've developed these community-based craft programs, and the women make some lovely crafts that are sold worldwide. Education is critical, and we teach a predator's role in the ecosystem. And we teach from school children to farmers. We've got a farmers program called Future Farmers of Africa, which we've now spread throughout many of the different cheetah range countries in Africa, as well as our educational programs, where in Namibia we've actually had well over 1 million school children that have come through our educational programs. And of course encourage a lot of volunteers to come and work with us. International volunteers, students from around the world, so we welcome any of you to volunteer, come do your PhD, your undergraduate, but we just welcome people to come and visit us as well. So prey and habitat are critical to the cheetah, And with that, as I'd mentioned, Namibia is very famous for what are called our conservancies. And with this, Namibia is a very, very large, dry, arid country, and the green areas are our national parks, which take up about 20% of the country. The brown and the spots in the middle are our communal and commercial conservancies, which are another about 20%. And here we've got this integrated system where we live on the land with all of our different wildlife, and we're taking our conservancy model to countries around the world. Zimbabwe is very active in community conservancies, as has been Kenya, and we've now tried to take this model to many of the other different countries. In our land, in our backyard, we not only deal with cheetahs as a large landscape, we can deal with a variety of other species, that of the rhinos, also the African wild dog, which is very compatible to work with that we do with human-wildlife conflict. And we've got hundreds of giraffe on our land, as well as many of the other wildlife species that was just in the last picture. When you have a lot of overgrazing of land, from especially arid land, from livestock, you get overgrazing. And overgrazing often can turn your land into actual deserts, or it can turn your land, your desert land, into thick and thorn bushed areas, which I've seen throughout much of the cheetah's range, because we have a lot of livestock farmers that are very poor in many of these areas that have overgrazed the land. In Namibia, half of our country, the northern half, is thick and thorn bush, where we've gone from an open savanna where the cheetahs were living into this thick and thorn bush. And we were finding that farmers were killing cheetahs because they were going, because they couldn't kill the thorn bush. Cheetahs were killing livestock because they were scratching their eyes and going blind by hunting in this thorn bush. And we found that we could actually do something. I lived in Oregon, where we had a lot of biomass and timber, and I'd see chip trucks, and I thought somebody should do something. Well, again, I did something. So I set up a habitat restoration project and went out and studied the biodiversity of all of these lands and started harvesting the bush. And with that, we make a fuel log, which is a chipped log going through an extrusion process, high heat and low emissions, and it's an eco-log, and we've gotten quite a few awards for our log. And right now, we are going into a biomass technology center, which we've just developed, and we're looking at using our thick and thorn bush for biomass electricity. And we've got so much bush that we could actually power most of the world, almost, with the bush that we have in Namibia. We're also Forest Stewardship Council certified, and I talk about certification because I think we as consumers can actually change how we're looking at the earth today by consuming the right things through certification. We've been able to do a lot of reintroduction of cheetahs. We've done a lot of translocation and rehabilitation of orphan cheetahs in Namibia, and for the last about 15 years have done very, very well with a lot of our translocations and rehabilitation. For the last 15 years, I've worked closely with the government of India and got involved in their reintroduction programs. 3 years ago, we were able to put a group of 20 cheetahs into India after the Indian cheetah became extinct 70 years ago. And it was the first time this had ever been done, and our 8 cheetahs came from Namibia, another 12 from South Africa. This is one of our cheetahs that we were able to take there. The mother is right here. Her name is Siaya, and this is her 4 cubs that are all now out living free and in the wild in India. We've had some losses. We've had greater successes. We've had 26 births and 7 litters. Today we have over 30 cheetahs living in Namibia, in India. We've gotten another reserve. This is in Kuno National Park, and the government of Namibia and Botswana are looking at bringing in another group of cheetahs. We have looking at a 20-year program to try to, every few years, bring a few cats in to diversify the genetics and maximize the population. But we do and are very eager and happy that India is a partner in trying to bring cheetahs back onto their landscape. We're working with several other countries here in the world, one of those being Saudi Arabia, and we're trying to help maximize the genetics of the cheetahs and bring them back. One of the areas that we're working in is the Horn of Africa with the samaringi, and this is a subspecies. There are 4 subspecies, and this one was recently uplisted from vulnerable to endangered. Only the southern African cheetah is vulnerable. The other subspecies are either endangered or critically endangered. And the cubs, this has been a really big problem that we're bringing awareness and partnershiping to, especially here. The cubs are actually stolen out of the bush. This is a short video that I'd like to show, I don't know if it will, of what happens. The cubs are stolen from the bush, and they're mostly coming up from Ethiopia and Somalia and Somaliland. They group them and bundle them together. All of these cubs are tied by their legs. We got them, this is the last batch that we got just about a month and a half ago, and most of these cubs were all limping by the time we got them. A couple of them had been tied up for at least 6 months or more and couldn't even walk. But this is really the kind of face that we are dealing with, and with this we see for every one of these that might make it into the trade, 4 or 5 of them usually die en route. So again, they bundle them. What we've had to do in Somaliland is to develop an entire center, a lot of malnutrition, but we're looking at individuals and populations, and we've got issues of supply and demand, and together we're trying to combat this through our rehabilitation, our censusing that we're doing, education and awareness. The government gave us a piece of land. We now have the pink area here, which is circled, is about 300 hectares. We've now got about 28 compounds. They're very huge compounds. We've developed a veterinary clinic. We've got a butchery area. We're now on base 2, which is kind of the blue area right here, that we're working on trying to develop. It'll be a 1,500 hectare fenced area where we'll be able to start reintroductions of not only cheetahs, but we're hoping to many of the other species that are also rare in these areas. Just a fun thing of what it actually looks like to keep these animals healthy. Cheetahs need a lot of exercise. Ours are all in very, very large compounds. This is what it's like feeding them, getting them ready. They're chasing after their food truck, but we keep all of our cheetahs very well exercised on a regular basis. And then what does it really look like to see 130 cheetahs being fed? We keep our males and females in different sex groups. This is a group of 12 females that had come in. We raised them up with their male partner, brothers and sisters, and then we separate sexes out when they're about 15 months of age. But it's pretty amazing, and one of my dear friends, Wilma, is here. She was with us for about 6 months helping manage our facility there. But you can't see this many cheetahs anywhere in the world. But to go from rescue into saving them is really what we're all about. And that is by teaching the people on the ground that it is illegal. And people didn't know this. And with this, we've done all of our programs from Namibia have been trained and changed into programs up in Somaliland. We've just built an education center with the partnership of the Royal Commission for Alula, who realized that they have a problem and want to be a part of the solution to the problem that we have. We're very excited. Our education center just was built about a month ago, and we're just starting to get our educational programs going. We've surveyed most of Somaliland. We've been able to put in this green area camera traps throughout to try to find the biodiversity and the different wildlife. And now we're building conservancies on the land. And the conservancies taking the model like what we have used in Namibia, where we've now developed 3 conservancies, and we're working on a national park. And this is a country that's not even recognized, and we're looking for partners to assist us because this is where the cheetah can live, other wildlife can live there, and the people are very eager to want to help live in a gentle place, and through protection of the wildlife and looking at livelihood development, that the cheetah could have a place on Earth. So partnerships are very, very important. Changing of the laws in Somaliland to list the law, because there was really no law, or for protection and working with CITES. And again, our partners from IUCN have been very, very important. So there is hope, and we hope that everybody around the world will join us, because we do want to see the cheetah saved. And just through a little window to give you a shot of Namibia, we are a very arid country. Cheetahs live in arid countries. But I would love to welcome all of you to come to Namibia to visit us. We have a guest house. We're very small, but you can come and learn about our research and our conservation and learn more about Namibia. And I would welcome all of you to come. It's an eco-lodge. It's very nice, and all of it supports the work that we're doing. We're a very small nonprofit trying to do a lot of work, and you can learn more about what we do by going to our website, please, which is cheetah.org, and get involved to help us save the fastest land animal. So thank you. We get a lot of support from zoos around the world, but again, we're small, and zoos aren't big either, and together we can do a lot. Thank you. This is a book that I did a couple years ago. It's a big textbook with another 140 co-authors. It's called Cheetahs, and it gives you the background of all the data and science that we've been putting into saving the cheetah. Thank you very much.
That's amazing. Let's talk a bit more. I'm sure we have a lot of questions. And yes, here you go. I think I will go straight into the question, and I will take either one. Yes, if we have a microphone for here. Yes. Thank you, Laurie. Do you want to? Can you see anything? Do you want to come a bit
I need
further?
to get my sunglasses. Or put my tear marks on.
All right. Yes.
My question is, what would be the biggest impact on the environment if cheetahs didn't got extinct?
Yes.
That's a great question. Well, cheetahs play a very key role in the health of an ecosystem, because what a top predator does is it feeds everything. And so when you actually have a top predator, it feeds all the other predators, other small mammals, insects, birds of prey, and then you have greater biodiversity, even the insects. And the cheetah shares its food with everything. It's the best hunter. And so you end up with a much healthier ecosystem that's more biodiverse. When you don't have them on the land, then you have more problems. And I always say to our farming community that if you have a cheetah and it is feeding the jackals, then the jackal's not going to be in your goat yard eating your goats. How's that?
That's good. Thank you.
Okay.
That's good.
Did I convince you?
I think that was pretty good. All right, yes, at the back over there.
Hello. Okay. So before I ask my question, I want to thank you for coming here. I feel very inspired. This is amazing. So my question is, so you mentioned about how cheetahs have a physiological and genetic issue, right? So what are the factors that affect those issues with the cheetahs?
Well, they went through a population bottleneck, so we say, or a very slow extinction, of which we kind of highlighted about 15,000 years ago, where they escaped the Pleistocene extinction. And with that, it has left them reproductively abnormal to some extent. So males, their reproductive abnormality is actually tied into the lack of genetic diversity. But with it, we've also seen a weakened immune system, and we see a lot of viruses that if you, like with the normal domestic cat or many of the other feline
you would not have high mortality. With the cheetah, if it sees it, you'll have huge mortality, like feline infectious peritonitis, which is a coronavirus, which we all went through.
Yes,
COVID.
we know.
But, well, the cheetahs started their COVID problem back at the discovery of a coronavirus for cheetahs back in the early 80s. And when they see this virus, you kind of see about 100% mortality. So their immune system is very weakened along that line.
And is it getting better then? Is it getting better? Can you see the difference? Or?
Well, we've studied it for a long time. Oh, well, boy, yes. And it mutates. So the coronaviruses will mutate, and then it becomes feline infectious peritonitis. But we've actually been working with researchers, I think in Cornell and UC Davis, with a product now that has come out, and even more so after we all went through COVID, which was something called GS44. And it is very common FIP with domestic cats, and it actually will clear the cats up pretty much 100%. It was very expensive, but now it's much more reasonable. And a domestic cat's this big and a cheetah's that big. So it was a hard process, but we've been able to clear that one. But we continue studying viruses, very much so.
It's amazing. All right, we have one question. Oh, yeah, okay, over there, and then here. I can see you. All right, yeah, yes.
Yes, my question is, the second center you said you developed in Somaliland. You had mentioned that Somaliland isn't internationally recognized, so I wanted to know what took you to that part of Africa.
I ended up in that part of Africa because there was confiscations of cheetahs, and there was nobody there to take care of them. And I'm on the phone pretty much 24 hours a day anywhere there's cheetah problems. And there was a large confiscation, and I got up there, and they said, bring something. And I got there, and there was nothing. And I just said, I can't see these animals die. I can save them. Well, that was 8 years ago. And now we have saved them. We've got about 127 cheetahs that are alive. And it's a lovely country. I welcome all of you to Somaliland, too. So please come and help me.
Nice. We have a question here.
Do cheetahs act different in the wild and in captivity? Like, how different?
Well, cheetahs do. What they believe in flight versus fight. So they run and they hunt. And they're shy animals. So if they see you in the wild, they want to turn around and run away. Hiss, spat, run. In captivity, if they're not tame, they hiss and spat. And if they're tame, they might purr. But if you do something that they don't like, they might also swatch you. So running is what they like to do.
How
run
about
away.
like their emotions? Like the emotions.
Their emotions.
Like, do they have emotions? Like, do they change, sad, happy?
I think all animals have emotions. I bet you even the fish do that we just learned about. But that's something that we'd have a long discussion on.
Dr. Christopher Godley says yes, of course.
But yes, I think cheetahs do have emotions.
All right. At the back over there, we have a question. We have, yes.
Why did you get interested in cheetahs when there's many other species?
Whoa, well, I think that the cheetah took me as a sucker, and I was interested because nobody knew anything about them. And that I just was like, tell me about cheetahs, and nobody could tell me. I now want to tell everybody in the world about the cheetah. So, and it grabbed me and took me down this route of its life, and I think it's pretty neat.
Oh.
Nice. All right.
Thank you.
One question here.
Uh-oh.
Yes.
Group your questions, kids.
Yes, one question.
When did you...
because I needed to. And you know what? I found that I asked who was going to go save the cheetah, and I kept asking, and nobody stepped forward.
When did you didn't tell that, how did you, like the baby cheetahs?
How did you find the baby cheetahs? Is that? Where did you?
When you were tied.
When they were attached?
No, when you were stuck, how did you get them out?
Oh, well, we went in there and we put gloves on and held them very gently, and then we had to cut the rope off of them. Okay, very gently.
All right. We have.
You got one?
Yes.
We have seen the cheetahs in these compounds where you were feeding them, but I guess you will reintroduce them back to the wild. Or how long will it take, or are these cheetahs staying for good with you? What is the plan with them?
Well, they came in as very young cubs, and so they're habituated. And when we started, we had rescue center. Now we've got these large compounds. And I think that some of the animals that we're now getting in faster and getting them into these large areas and getting them healthy quicker, we potentially could utilize some of them in what I would say a first stage reintroduction area. We go through the similar thing. We've written several papers on reintroduction. So look up Cheetah Reintroduction. You'll read our series of how we would go about rehabilitation, and then probably second generation could go back out into the wild. We need large areas, and we need them not habituated with people.
But you are also breeding them?
No. In Namibia, we're not allowed to breed because Namibia wants to keep our animals wild and are trying to stop having them in captivity. We work with our Namibian government as the rescue center there for orphan animals. But then if we can put them, and most of the orphans that we get in Namibia, we're able to raise up and put back out into the wild. In Somaliland, many of the animals are not healthy enough, but we're looking at next stages at this point in time. But I have to continue building the compounds. And so I'm already a couple years down the road with not having it developed yet.
Oh, okay.
So it's a work in progress. But I see that many of those animals could potentially go someplace soon, and soon is a relative period of time, in a couple years.
Okay, and the reintroduction in the wild, last question, how long may it take? You will support them with food for a while until they are able to hunt themselves?
Yeah. Reintroduction takes a period of time, but we've come up with strategies of how to do this. And you do, when you put them back out, you do have to be, they're obviously collared and you're tracking them, but you do have to subsistently feed them to begin with. But if you put them out in these large areas and they learn their area and they see the sights and smells, and we keep them well exercised, their brain is healthy, their body is healthy, they now just have to put two and two together when they go out to try to figure out how to find their prey. And search is the biggest thing that they have to do to begin with to find out where food might be. So it's a real big process.
It's amazing. All right. Yes. One question here, and we'll have a last one. Okay. Yes.
So in my when I used to live in Tanzania, I went to Kenya for the wildebeest crossing. And during that time, I saw a cheetah that was just chilling on a rock. And after we like stopped to just watch the cheetah, and plus this rock was like so big, so the cheetah was able to like jump down, and it was just like playing around, like climbing around on the rock. And I was thinking, how are leopards and cheetahs like different? Because leopards are strong physically, they can climb, but cheetahs don't follow and do the same thing.
No, cheetahs run. And leopards are more of a ambush stalk kill. And cheetahs actually, when he was up on a rock to see, and they can see, they say a couple kilometers without binoculars. So they have excellent eyesight. And so they spot their prey and then they try to get as close as they can and then go into a fast speed chase. Unlike a leopard will stalk and then pounce and kill.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Last question, and I'm sure if you have more questions, Dr. Lori will stay around a bit. Yes.
You talked at the beginning of your presentation about human-cheetah conflict and about the farmers trapping and killing the cheetahs. When you start working in a new area, I appreciate that you're going to educate the farmers, but then how do you work with that farming community? Because presumably it's quite a leap of faith for those farmers. So you're saying, no, more cheetahs is a good thing. They're saying, well, we've been killing them to protect our livestock. And then you're coming back saying, well, if you don't kill them, you do this instead, things will be better. But how do you manage that with them? And how do you manage any resistance that the community has to sort of engaging with cheetah conservation?
That's a great question. And I have always go in and ask questions. And so I call it a needs assessment. And I ask a lot of questions about their systems and how they farm and what they do. And I look at the land a lot. So I think that's the first thing, is a needs assessment. But also, cheetahs are not a wanton livestock catching animal. So what we've learned in most predators, their livestock loss for like cattle would be under 6 months of age. 90% of those losses for both cheetahs and leopard would be under 1 month of age. And so again, I've written books on livestock management with the farmers telling me what we know. But if you have a calving season and you protect your calves for the first month, you're going to reduce your livestock loss by at least 90%. Through our educational programs, we found through good livestock management education, an integrated system, through our surveys we've done, you actually reduce livestock losses by over 70% through just education, because they don't know about vaccinations. Many of the farmers, and I'm dealing with both commercial and communal. And so I think that education has been a really, really key thing. But what I try to do is to look at what their needs are and and I say this to everybody globally, and I'm an American, and so I go back to America and I deal with wolf issues. But we've got livestock guarding dogs. They've been working for 5,000 years. The dogs don't think that we're very smart. They love their livestock, for heaven's sake. So, I mean, it's just amazing what you can learn by thinking. But predators are not wanton livestock catching animals, which people think they are. I believe that livestock loss and human-wildlife conflict is actually, is it a predator problem? But I always ask farmers, what role do you think you play in the loss of your livestock? Were you protecting it? Did you have a calving season? Did you close your gate? Did you go away for the weekend and forget to put your livestock anywhere and have anyone feed it? And we think that predators are the problem. We play a very huge role in the livestock losses we have, and we blame the predators. So I'm sort of at that point in time right now where I think that we should take care of what we're supposed to, which is our livestock. I am a livestock farmer. I've been a livestock farmer my whole life, and that's why we have a model farm. Thank you.
Amazing. All right.
Thank you.
We will close the discussion here on stage. Again, I would thank you so much for accepting the invitation. It was a veritable honor to have you tonight. I would like to thank again Dr. Gottlieb as well. I think it was a very diverse but very rich talk tonight. So thanks both of you. Thanks Dr. Mitchell, of course, as well. Thanks all of you for coming. I hope you enjoy, and next month another topic which you will have the surprise to see online when it's announced. All right, we are looking forward to see you next month. Thank you again.